Hey, before I discuss the music in the CD, I have not addressed the packaging of the CDs very much, just because I wanted to put the focus on the music. And, there's masks, there's a giant manhole for Zappa in New York that the disc came in, there's the Halloween masks, then some funky little packaging. But I did want to point out one thing that I appreciate, and like sort of a thematic thing that I enjoy, is all of the Vaulternative releases, which have centered around a specific location, such as FC Aussie, Philly 76, Chicago 78, which I've yet to review, Hammersmith Odeon. I'm sure there's a couple that I'm forgetting. And the one I'm about to discuss have two really unique features in each of the releases in the packaging. One is they all have a map at some point of wherever the location is. Boston, this is the state of Massachusetts. For those of you who are not from the United States, it is much smaller than it appears on this disc cover. So you get the state for Australia. I think you had the entire map of Australia for FC Aussie. But the other thing is somewhere either in the liner notes, either in a separate booklet, or in the case of this album on the actual CD sleeves, there is a list of endangered fauna and endangered flora native to wherever the concert is taking place, which I just think is a really eye-opening, educational, kind of environmental gut check moment on each CD that I have to admit I really appreciate. And I wanted to give a shout out to, if anybody in Vaulternative is watching this and this was your idea, it is a brilliant idea. And I, for one, super appreciate both the sort of aesthetics of the map on each CD and that awesome list of not so awesome information. But anyways, on to the review. Hello, and thank you, and welcome to my channel for the first time or the minieth time. My name is Shaggy, and I'm currently ranking and reviewing every single Frank Zappa album released after he passed away in December of 1993. And I'm currently on, this feels like almost a kind of a drum roll moment, on number 6, the last release not to make the top 5 of the post-93 releases, and it is Wazoo. Zappa Cigarette Slash Wazoo. That's a cigarette, right? Or is that a baton? Probably a baton, right? Though I think either one works. This is a 2-disc set released. When was it released? 2007, of course, right around Halloween. And it is a complete show from the fall, late summer, fall. I think all the shows were in September. So it was actually maybe late summer. And then a couple shows in the early fall. 1972 big band tour that Frank went on. I will put a list of all the musicians right there so you can see all the incredible people that played on here. Notice there's some woodwinds, there's some brass, there's even a string instrument, got different types of percussion. You got some people who would then appear in many other Frank bands in the future. So each one of these individuals on this list is phenomenal. But this is a complete concert, the last show that they actually did of the 7 shows they did on that run. Yeah, this is from September 24th, so we're talking about probably the only fall one. The rest of them were late summer shows. And it is probably the only thing from this tour we're going to get. I think Frank has said many times in many different things that this was the only show from this tour that was recorded, if my understanding is correct. So this is the only thing we're probably going to get. There are bootlegs out there with varying sound quality, but the sound on this is ridiculous. So though it is the only recording we're probably going to get from this tour, this sound is much better than the 2 releases that came from the following tour, the smaller sort of big bang tour, the Petite Wazoo tour, which I already reviewed, Imaginary Diseases and Little Dots. The sound on this is better. When I first put this on and was listening to it, I thought one of my speakers was broken because Frank was speaking and he was only in the right channel. And I got the CD version. I don't even know if there was an LP at the time, but I had the CD version. So I only heard Frank in the right channel, so I skipped ahead to the second track to see if, there was a more balanced mix. And Tony Duran's slide guitar kicks off Gregory Wazoo with that womp, wah, 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 just that riff. But it also was only in the right channel. So it's like, what the heck? I was kind of upset. And then I listened for like 10 more seconds and the full band came in all speakers. So the mix is great. The separation is great. It sounds amazing. And unfortunately, I was trying to discern which particular, is this a Bruce Fowler trombone solo or did somebody else do this solo? Is this a Sal Marquez trumpet solo or did somebody else play this? So when Frank gives the introductions in the beginning, which is what the first track consists of, you can map sonically where the instruments are. Unfortunately, they're all kind of in the same place. So all the trumpets are right here, just at if you had a 1 to 12 spectrum, right around 10. All the trombones are right around 4. Saxes are somewhere in the middle, So when they announced Bruce Fowler, and he's right here at 3. The other trombonists were right at 3 and 4 too. So anyways, but that's just to point out how amazing the sound is. I don't think it ever gets muddy, even though you have all these instruments playing this really complex music. Even during Approximate, which is the closest thing, I think, in the Frank catalog that sounds like unintentional chaos. Or maybe it is meant to sound like that, but it does sound like it's getting away from itself a couple times, but that's obviously the nature of the song. Even in something like Approximate, the sound is amazing, even though everybody's going full blast, during those written parts. And then during the solos, just the instruments are also clear and the soloists are also clear. And at times you'll have a trombone player playing something over here, and then maybe a trumpet's doing something bolero-esque in the background over here, and you can feel the room and feel the space. It's much love to the sound on this. It is really incredible. As are the performances, which is why this is number 6. Why is this number 6? Is the question, right? And I would say the reason this is number 6 is because of the guitar solos, not necessarily not the actual guitar solos. They're all good. They're all interesting. In fact, the one that Frank plays on the second disc in the second movement of Gregory Peck, the third movement of Gregory Peck is just one of his. You can see his development as he's heading into 73 and 74. Where Dupree's Paradise became, I think, one of his most interesting solo spots ever, in which he was really trying to think outside the box and do different things. You can really feel that, and I think the movement 3 of Gregory Peck on the second disc, and then he has a solo, I think, in Big Swifty and one in Gregory Wazoo. So he really only has 3 solos, but they're all really good solos. But that's the issue. There's only 3 solos. I want more solos. And if you'll look at the other releases that I've yet to discuss, there's more solos on those. So that's why this is number 6. But I would still give it a 9.9 or a 10 if I had to rank it, as I would 7, 8, 9, and 10, and 11, and 12 in those. So the quality, we are picking the slightest little nits here. Yeah, so that's about that. That's all of that. Let's talk about the songs. So again, there are 8 tracks. 2 of the tracks, well, actually, if you get the CD, the Gregory Peck movements are each indexed separately. So it's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 songs, and then there's 2 tracks that have speaking in them, but one of the songs has 4 different parts. So there's 9 songs actually total. 2 of those songs, maybe 3 of those songs, yeah, probably the last 3 of those songs are for the most part completely written out with little spurts of solos in them. You don't get a lengthy 3 or 4 minute section where somebody's soloing at length and the band is improvising. You just get these little pockets throughout the songs in which someone whips off a quick little solo, riffs off some riffs or some licks before we go back into the song. That's in the last 3 tunes. Everything else on this is your typical jazz rock type number. You get the main theme, you get the head, you get a lengthy solo section, you get a closing section. And you get pretty much that for the first 3 songs, the entire first disc, which consists of the Gregory Wazoo, Approximate, and Big Swifty. Pretty interesting set list. On other shows early in the tour, New Brown Clouds was the opening, and then that eventually got moved towards the end. So now Grand Wazoo is open. It's a really good opener. It is, it's a little more palatable than the rest of the stuff. I think it's the most mainstream thing on here. As Frank says, it's oriented towards a boogie, so it's easy to get behind. And it's phenomenal. It sounds exactly like the Grand Wazoo, other than the opening doesn't have that sort of soft kind of electric acoustic guitar sound that opens the album version, but it starts off with that Tony Duran riff, that dunt, bow now, bunt, bow now, and then you go off little solos in there. You play the main composed music, then you get a really nice, healthy solo section with some amazing solos in it, including a good Frank solo at the end, and then it all wraps up, and the entire thing, all the music is about 17 minutes long worth of music. And some really good, healthy solos. This is a pretty straightforward solo section in which the soloist is kind of the main attraction. But again, the rhythm section is amazing at all points in time. Frank is making sure things are always staying interesting. If he has to throw in little bursts or improvised, directed improvisations. But the Grand Wazoo is a pretty much straightforward jazz rock number. And interesting, the album had not come out yet, so this was, something people had not heard before. The album wouldn't come out for another 2 months. Then you get Approximate, which is the live debut of this song, just as Grand Wazoo is the live debut of that song, at least on record for us as a listener. And this pretty much sounds exactly like Approximate would always sound. Like it would sound in 74 on stage 2, like it would sound on You Can't Do That on Stage Volume 4, all the way in the 80s. And so if you're not familiar with this piece, the rhythm is notated, but the pitch isn't. So each instrument, each musician can play wherever they want. They can play whatever pitch they want. They just got to hit the rhythm marks. And so every time it's played, expecting that the musicians are not going to play identical notes every single time, it's going to be a different version. So you get that, and maybe it's the way Frank was conducting it. Maybe it's the way it was written here. Maybe it's the nature of woodwinds and brass and all that stuff. But there's a lot of just like bleeding noise that goes into the next beat. When they want it to be, a little more staccato and like rough and like with just silence between the beats, it happens. But there's a large section in the beginning where it doesn't happen. And it's like this bleeding brass and woodwind noise that carries over down into the next beat. And it sounds kind of chaotic and out of control. But then right when you think it's like, oh, they're not ready to play this, they shouldn't, Frank like brings it in and it gets tight again. So I'm confused as whether it's intentional or not. It sounds like maybe it's not, because I don't know, but it's a really good listen. And this may be the best version of Approximate. Listen to this, and then listen to the Stage 4 version from that band, from the early 80 version, I think with Steve Vai in the band, and that's just two incredibly different worlds right there. Just almost ridiculous. But then some really good solos. The solos in here are a lot more, Frank does a lot of conducting in the middle of solos, so it has more of a mother's feel to it. Where somebody will be soloing and the band will start playing dun, 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 a little approximate part or different parts of that song over the solo. And then when they come back in, it's kind of a different rhythm that's been established. So the middle part of this is a slightly more mother's 60s chaotic type vibe. And it's definitely not as straightforward jazzy as the Grand Wazoo is. And then the first disc closes off with Big Swifty. Really good Big Swifty. Again, band sounds great. The solo section is probably the funkiest of these three. The bass really goes in hard once we hit that solo section. It's just establishing a groove, and everybody gets a nice solo over that. And again, this is a little more Grand Wazoo-ish than it is Approximate in that middle section, but I think it's still a little more out there than the Grand Wazoo. But all three of these songs, the sound is amazing, the performances are amazing, the solos are amazing. Like, three absolutely fantastic songs back to back to back, that if you are a jazz rock fan and you like to hear musicians stretch out their wings and solo and just go at it with a rhythm section that is just to die for, you can't go wrong with this. And that's only the first disc. Second disc opens up with Frank explaining that they're going to play Gregory Peck, but this time they're going to add solos at the end of each section. It's 4 sections. They're throwing New Brown Clouds in as the third section. So the first movement is essentially the beginning of Gregory Peck as we know it on Studio Tan, with that dun 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 da 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 da. So you get that, about 2 minutes of that, and then you get some solos. And what Frank explains everybody he's going to do is, once we finish the movement, and after the first movement, the front row is going to play 16th notes, you know? And then once they establish these 16th notes, Frank is going to conduct them off into something else. After the second movement, the second row is going to play 16th notes, and then Frank's going to conduct them over something else. Third movement, he tells other people to play 16th notes, and then they're off into something else. And then the fourth movement is New Brown Clouds, which doesn't have solos in it, but has little pockets of solos throughout. So Franks explains that this is what they're going to do. He tells the band live in front of us, this is our plan. Somehow manages to pull it off and produce just 3 completely different sounding yet still unique and engaging improv sections after the first 3 movements. So the first movement, again, like I said, is that beginning of Gregory Peck. They start the 16th notes, and this pretty much is the shortest of the improv sections. The entire thing is 4 minutes and 50 seconds long. It's about 2.5 minutes of improv, about a little over 2 minutes of written, composed music. And for this part, it really has almost a cartoonish royalty feel, like, oh, here comes the king, you know, and it plays like some cartoon marching music, but it's not the king, it's Bugs Bunny, and his ears are wrapped up to form a crown, and isn't it kind of funny? So it has this sort of pomp and circumstance type feel, but again, that sort of cartoon Frankish thing where it's incredibly well done, but we're not sincerely doing this kind of music, so there's that little tongue-in-cheek in there. But it sounds amazing, of course, while this whole thing is happening. And so that happens, and they go into the second movement, and the second movement is when he invents the calendar. So it's the inventing the calendar section, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all that part with all goes into that. That's another, I think that's about 3 minutes maybe this goes to, and this is a pretty long section. And then this, I think, is my favorite improv section on this, definitely is my favorite improv section on this release, because it starts off with sort of a Devil's Triangle / Mars vibe, that sort of, you got Mars, you got King Crimson's Devil's Triangle, then you got Mars, the actual Holt Symphony piece. You have that vibe that starts to get established. It's kind of eerie and creepy, but then bolero, trumpet starts playing, and it gives it a very bolero aspect. And so it's this weird, you know, Ravel-esque melding of musical ideas, you know, and people are soloing over this, and then Frank conducts them into other stuff, and then they go just into a hardcore tango. Like, this is straight up tango material, which I'm pretty sure there's a trombone solo in this little tango section, which makes me think this is the actual birth of the bebop tango, maybe, is this actual improv section. And Frank was like, oh no, we're taking this and putting it somewhere else. So maybe that happened. But this entire thing, this whole movement's like 9 minutes and 7 seconds long. It's about 6 minutes of improv. This is just some of the most interesting, engaging, kind of a little all over the place, but with a very eerie quality. And the tango, of course, by this point, by the time they get to the tango, after going through the bolero part and all that other stuff, has a slightly sinister feel to it. Then we go through the third movement, which is the movement when the henchmen are coming after him, and there's that dun 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 dun, the little part. And so you get that, and then you get a really, really, really long improv section in this one that, again, is a little more chaotic. When the actual written music stops and they go into the improv section, you can hear Frank go, circular breathing, and the band's doing circular breathing, and then Frank takes that and kind of takes them off in other places, and then eventually he plays a solo, and his solo has some hardcore New Brown Clouds riffing in it, and it is very, like, hesitant at first, but purposefully so, and then it goes off. And then they go into New Brown Clouds after that, and that whole section is like 12.5 minutes long, that entire third movement. Then they go into New Brown Clouds, which is mostly composed the entire thing, but has little pockets of solos that pop out throughout the entire thing. And this New Brown Clouds includes the Philosopher Speaks part of Gregory Peck, so that music is baked into this version of that. And then that closes that closes the main set before the encores. And so that entire, you get a 32-minute, essentially 32.5-minute Gregory Peckery with some of the most amazing directed improvisation and solos and just rhythmic sort of the background of each of these little solo improv sections, just phenomenal. Playing ridiculously hard music that sounds like it was performed really, really well. I'm sure Frank would have lots of notes for all the mistakes made. I don't hear them. My ears are not picking up the mistakes they're making. And then you get, for your encore, you get Penis Dimension into something called Variant 1 Processional March, which is essentially a very fast version of Egyptian Strut. A really fast version of Egyptian. It's almost like a stampede version of Egyptian Strut. But these both sound phenomenal. They do have little solo sections in them, not like jams, but where people get a chance to just show off. Yeah, and that's it. But that's what you get. You get 1, 2, 3, Gregory Peckery being one long 32-minute song. You get 6 songs essentially. 4 of the 6 have really, really long solo sections and lots of chances for people to step up and shine. It is a amazing, amazing listen. No lyrics anywhere on here. Nobody is singing any songs. And then finally, one last thing I want to point out is, like I said earlier, this might be the only release that comes out from here. These are the other songs that were played on tour that we don't have versions of that I really think, well, one of them I would really like to hear, but I think I'm okay with the other. So Chunga's Revenge was played at other shows. There was a medley in the first 3 shows of low-budget symphony orchestra into Dog Breath, into Uncle Meat, so you like a low-budget dog meat, essentially. That was eventually, the low budget was eventually dropped and Dog Meat stuck around for a little bit longer, so we wouldn't get a version of those. And then they played for Calvin and his next 2 hitchhikers, which essentially almost sounded exactly like the studio version. But again, it would be neat to hear that. But we're probably not going to get those because apparently they weren't recorded. But there are some boots out there, maybe on YouTube. I haven't looked. But anyways, that's it. I'm done with this release. Yeah, I'm sorry. I recommend it. I'm not meaning for you to spend money. It's just, it's really, really, really good music. And then after this, it's the top 5. On to the top 5. Thank you for watching. Subscribe. Leave me comments below. Let me know what you think about this. I really, really appreciate all the feedback and the interaction and all that stuff. So anyways, it's raining here in Texas and the temperature is dropping, so that's a good thing. All right. Peace. Talk to you later. Bye.